Let's talk about hospitality. All pubs, restaurants and hotels should be allowed to reopen from April, with life for the hospitality industry returning to normal by June. This is according to sector bosses. Trade group UK Hospitality is calling for a radical overhaul of the tier system used before lockdown in a bid to prevent mass job losses and allow businesses to restart as soon as possible. Let's speak to Kate Nicholls, the author of this report, CEO of UK Hospitality. Hello, Kate.
Good afternoon.
So what is your roadmap out of this pandemic?
Well, I think it mirrors a lot of what the government is looking to do. It's a phased, targeted approach. It's linked to the vaccine rollout and the protection of the most vulnerable. But it's also looking at the mitigation measures that hospitality put in place in July to allow an earlier reopening than perhaps might have been hinted at by the government yesterday and the Prime Minister in his statement yesterday, so that hospitality is not at the back of the queue, but it is seen as a safe environment, and therefore we can move ahead more rapidly to a swifter, safer, stable return to hospitality reopening and playing its part in the economic recovery as early as April.
Given the fact that the data suggests overwhelmingly that COVID is spread in hospitals, care homes and in the private sphere, as in at home, it's a real punch in the guts, isn't it, to publicans and restaurateurs who spent thousands before the most recent lockdown making their venues COVID safe, and the data backed up that those venues were COVID safe.
Absolutely. I think it's reminding the government that we worked really closely with them, Public Health England, the chief medical officers, the Cabinet Office, to put in place the toughest COVID restrictions for hospitality in the world, with our protocols that allowed for reopening in July. Actually, those protocols were so severe and so strict that they limited the ability for those businesses to break even. But it was a price we were willing to pay in order to keep our teams and our customers safe. And we're incredibly proud of the fact that we reopened with those protocols in July, 60 million customer visits a week. We had less than 1% of positive cases in our staff, less than 3% of cases attributed to hospitality. And as you say, our venues on average invested £20,000 in order to put in place controls and mitigation measures. And we went above and beyond what we needed to be able to protect people within our venues. So space, meeting at the door, a track and trace system that was in place 2 to 3 months before the government's own track and trace system to make sure that we could contact people, hygiene, sanitation, ventilation, and our customers felt safe. We had 75% of our customers said they felt safe in hospitality. They did not feel safe on public transport or retail. So we're saying our venues are safe. We've done everything we need. The risks are mitigated. You can allow hospitality to reopen safely without any increase in cases.
Tell me about the vaccination programme. Clearly it's world class. It's very successful. It could lead to a vaccine passport for international travel. What about flashing a vaccine ID to get into your local pub?
We don't think that that's necessary, proportionate or appropriate for people. In fact, if you look at, how long it might take for working age population and particularly younger people who make up 60% of our workforce and a large proportion of our customer base, they're not going to get the vaccine until potentially later into the summer, maybe even autumn at the worst case scenario. So while you've got a large proportion of customers and staff who are not vaccinated or who are choosing not to be vaccinated or who can't be vaccinated for medical reasons as well, we don't think that that's appropriate. We understand why people may want to have it for travel insurance or for international travel, but our protocols mean that the venue is safe. The vaccination of the most vulnerable, which account for 99% of deaths by April, means that the population is safe. So therefore, there's no need for a passport to be able to get into, go and have a coffee or a quick pint or a bite to eat.
Well, I'm pro-vaccine and anti-vaccine passport, and I couldn't agree with you more, Kate. Thanks very much for joining us, and keep fighting the fight to get pubs, bars, restaurants and other hospitality venues open as soon as possible. I suggest they should open at the same time as so-called non-essential shops. So let's talk more about Labour, and do their figures add up? Let's speak to Marcus in Stirling. Hi, Marcus.
Hi there. Just in response to hearing Mr. Murray's comments about what we do to boost our economy or regenerate our economy, he never actually mentioned which sectors these jobs were going to be coming from. Now, when we look at our manufacturing sector, we're sitting around 10 to 15%. of our GDP
Yeah.
when we had a GDP. Remember those days?
Oh, yes.
Actually comes from manufacturing. Now, Labour are in lockstep with the Green New Deal ideology, which is all fine and well if you think we're going to rebound making windmills, whether they be out in the sea or in the middle of our green and pleasant land. I remember the days, Mark, when Labour used to represent manufacturing, workers, the working class. They were fighting for British jobs and British jobs in manufacturing. Nowadays, they've completely forgotten this for every other minority cause under the sun.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I also wonder whether, Marcus, it's surprising that Keir Starmer hasn't spoken up for more working people during this pandemic who have been massively impacted by lockdown. But all we've seen from Labour is to cheer on the lockdowns and ask for more.
Well, indeed, there hasn't been any opposition as far as I can see. As far as Mr Starmer is concerned, all he's called for is harsher lockdowns. So he's going in exactly the same direction as the government with these lockdowns, as you correctly say, forgetting those businesses that are closing down in their thousands by the week that will never, in certain industries like you have touched on your great show, on the food and drink industry, on transport, on the tourism. Now, manufacturing can boost all of those things. If we're not producing anything, then where's the money coming from?
A question I wish more politicians would ask. Marcus, what a brilliant call. Do call again. Marcus in Stirling there. Continued borrowing, he says, will see debt spiralling. You know that. You understand that. The politicians don't seem to.